I've been thoroughly exploring the emotional and mental aspects of health and wellness, at least for the last 17 years, but in my own personal life, my entire life. And I'm 57 now, so I've had a bit of experience and practice with it. And what I've learned, and I start people off with when I'm helping them with Oneness Acupuncture therapy, is I give them a blank piece of paper, like the one on your screen at the moment. And I say, this is the beginning. This is the origin, and this is the potential state of delight and wonder that you can experience in your life, is this blank piece of paper. So, where are we gone here? Let's just find this point. Oops. So this is Integral Freedom. My name is Paul Chapman, and this is the video newsletter for October 2017. And I'm going to talk to you about the development of the BaGua and the return journey. And this white blank piece of paper before was formless. It had no direction, development of the BaGua and the return journey, no indication that it was a video newsletter, no association with Oneness Acupuncture therapy, or the oat symbol, or the actual hexagram symbol up here, or that it was Paul Chapman, or that 0 was simplicity, 1 was no change, and 2 was no change. It was formless. And this is the state of simplicity. And this is the subject of what I'm going to describe as in this video newsletter. So from simplicity, we now have form. So on a white blank piece of paper, we have created something in which we can find as tangible. And on top of this, I'm going to create the next stage. If I can get myself a colour that's dark enough. The next stage of development. Now, from the blank piece of paper, actually there was a circle on that blank piece of paper, but we couldn't see it because it was white and it had no boundary. And now we put a boundary on it. And this boundary, according to Taoism, is the boundary of your soul. And it's often represented as a spot in the center. And this is also symbolic from a lot of cultures and stuff of the sun. It can also be drawn as a straight line from the outside boundary to the center. What actually happens when this spot is brought into the center is that the totality of life experience, every single thing that comes into your life that you can see, you can perceive with all your 5 senses, is an aspect of the self. And what's actually happened is this point of contraction of consciousness has come to the center of the soul, and it now looks outward into the soul to perceive itself. Now, in Chinese theory, you could say, this is described as yin-yang. So this, the first, from the blank piece of paper, we come to this shape, which is called Taiji Tu. And it's the state of no change. So here I'll write it up for you. We have Tai Chi Tu. And this is what's called the supreme moral principle. Now, hold on a second here. Now, in my estimation, the supreme moral principle is one of oneness. Oneness. Or unity, you could say. And it is can be researched by people with Chinese medicine by looking at the supreme polarity diagram. Now, the supreme moral principle is a constant. It does not change, and it runs through all of life. And in Taoist philosophy, it is an energy that sits in the empty space in the middle of the heart. and it is also contained in a latent potential within the DNA within each cell. And its purpose is awakening. And it runs, like I said, throughout all life. And that occurred before the state of division. Now, division occurs from this point onwards, as represented in the BaGua by a straight line and a broken line. The straight line indicating yang, the broken line indicating yin. Now, we can also at this stage place in yin into the yang and yang into the yin. Now, as we've got yang up here already, we can say, okay, we've put yin into the yang, and we put yang into the yin. And if you notice, I'm just shading in this area here because this is representative of the yin side, and the fattest part of the yin is in this area, and consequently the yin goes there, and the fattest part of the yang is in this area. If I'd have drawn it correctly, it would have been fatter. And what's interesting here is as soon as yang and yin are separated, they can see each other. So if you think initially we had this boundless white circle, and then we put a boundary on it, and that boundary was represented by the central core, the contracting of consciousness to be able to perceive itself outside. And then we had a division of that core into two, one yin, one yang, and then we could say that these are the eyes. Yeah. And what happens when you have eyes is that eyes can start to perceive the other. So when this happened, this is why we get this yin within the yang and yang within the yin, is that it perceived each other. So yang was able to actually look upon itself, able to see itself, and yin was able to see itself as well. And then yin was able to see its reflection within the yang, and yang was able to see its reflection within the yin. Now this created four shapes: the two yang, and the two yin, and the yin's reflection in the yang, and the yang's reflection in the yin. And this the ancients called the four emanations, or the four duograms. And the attribute of greater yang was applied to the purest principle of yang, and greater yin to the purest principle of yin. And then we also had lesser yin, the aspect of the yin within the yang, and lesser yang, the aspect of yang within the yin. Now, as the nature, again, of reflection over here is occurring, as these fours manifested, also what occurred was their reflection. Actually, let's just get rid of that. Make some space. So their reflection was also created. So we had actually a doubling up of these four duograms, these four emanations. Some people say this was post-heaven and this one's pre-heaven. Now I'm just going to get rid of this one here so I can complete my shape. Actually go back. First of all, I should just say that the completion of this is that because this is for the purest aspect first, the yang, the purest, claimed all of these trigrams. And the yin, as the reflection, claimed all of these four, or these four duograms. And that made the 8 trigrams. And when you put the 8 trigrams around a shape like the yin-yang symbol, this is what occurs. Let's just get rid of this. So this is the reflection, but we'll use this as an example. So we've got the double yang and the yin-yang, which is the first two here. Then we have a yang and a yin again. So we have a yang yin here. And then we have 2 yins. So this is the yang side. because we can see that this is all white, all the yang side. And in the same way, the yin did the same. So we have this yin-yin here, and then a yang-yin, and then we need to do a yin-yang here, and a yang-yang there. And as this is the yang side, yang claimed all of these and created these 4 shapes. And then yin claimed all of these and created these 4 shapes. So we have the room for improvement drawing of the trigrams. Now I've drawn them, usually I've drawn them in this sequence from the outside inwards. And yet in this hexagram, this gua, this is called Fushi gua, Fushi, which is pre-heaven gua. The hexagrams, or the trigrams, are read from the inside outwards, but they're developed from the outside inwards. And this is a big bone of contention in the classical group of people that like to understand how the BaGua was developed. And in my opinion, it develops from the outside inwards because that is the nature that that is the way that we return to the origin of simplicity. So simplicity, remember, started with a boundaryless white circle. Then that white circle had a boundary with a point in the center, which is when consciousness first appeared. And then that divided into 2 with the ability for the eyes to look upon themselves and see each other. So we've had this development come from the blank piece of paper through to the potential to observe and see. But they're read from the inside outwards because that's how we discover how to go back to this state of simplicity. So how does this practically help us then? Let's have a look. So again, if we draw our circle, it's an interesting circle. Let's try this one instead. And we put our dot of consciousness in the center. And then from this, let's just say we draw, let's just draw an axis then. We draw a vertical axis. No, we won't. A vertical axis, a horizontal axis, and a diagonal axis. Which of course is going to give us 8 directions. And we could put the trigrams in there. But we could also put in things like, we could put up here AT for attitude. We could put up here happiness. We might put here intelligence. We might put here determination. Here we could put nurturing. Here we might put gentleness. We could put fear here, and we could put patience here. Now, when we look from our point, our central point of consciousness, and we look out into the world, we can see how all of these attributes, attitude, attention, happiness, what was this one? Intelligence, determination, gentleness, fear, patience, and nurturing. We can see how we view those aspects in the world by the way that we look at. Where's that going? By the way that we look at the things that we interact in our world. So let's just say this time we draw our center. And from our axis, we actually draw things in our life that, like we could put in here for, first of all, we could put family. Or maybe father. And now we put mother down here. And then we draw a horizontal axis. And we might put work and relationships. We could put a diagonal axis in, and we could put health and finances, and then put another diagonal axis in, and we might put likes and dislikes. Now remember that the sequence of development of the trigrams is coming from above to below. So that's telling us how things developed in creation. And the way we learn is coming from below back upwards. So what that tells us is that the origin, which is actually the circumference of the circle, represents the supreme moral principle of oneness. So when we view health or family or father or mother, finances, dislikes, work, likes and relationships, and we look at those in our worlds, do we actually own them as a means of describing how we are at the center? Because basically this, what is enclosed in this circle, the totality of all experiences, is the soul. It is the self. And this is the part of the self that is observing itself. It's looking out through all of these connections and observing what type of being, what type of entity it is. Now, often what we do is we put our power outside. Yeah? So we might not be very happy if our health is not good. We might not be content if the sort of work we're doing we don't like. We might have a problem with our mother or father. Maybe our finances are not sufficient enough, and that creates some dysfunction within ourselves, or our relationships are unstable. And we put all of the energies outside, and what we try to do is we try to control the outer space. We try to control it in a way to force it to change, and yet it's impossible. The outside space cannot change. It's the no change aspect. But the actual central core, this is the point of change. This is the two eyes that are looking to observe each other. Now they can change. They can look out into the world and they can see all of these aspects, and they can use something which the I Ching calls watching. This is the hexagram number 20, called watching. Now, there are two types of watching, again, subjective and objective. So, subjective watching, there we go, subjective, deals with the self. And what it is one examines one's inner motives. So we pay attention to what it is that drives us, what our intentions are. And then the other type of watching is objective. And here it's the other. And it's interesting to note that when it's the other, it's we watch or we observe their reactions, so others' reactions to our conduct. So again, it's the central part. So from the center here, it's a subjective looking at why do I like or dislike something? Why do I feel like that about my mother? And what is my intention when I behave in a certain way towards my mother? And what's my attitudes about my finances? And how do I feel that I am in relationships, etc., etc.? So this is subjective. And then the objective thing is, how does the relationship talk back to me and tell me about the type of person that I am? How do my finances come back to me and tell me about the person I am? Does it say that I'm not capable? Or does it say that I'm a superstar? Or does it say that my happiness is connected to my feeling of financial prosperity? Do my relationships tell me that actually I'm not a very good communicator? Despite the fact that I feel that nobody listens to me and it's all their fault and they're not actually doing the right thing. The aim is not to lose your power in the judgment and expanding or expense of energy in trying to correct something that's outside of the self. You're using the reflection from the outside in order that you may come to understand yourself as the only point or the only potential that can change something. So just to recap, so we have the blank piece of screen, and I could white out all this and give you that idea, but we know we have the blank piece of screen, which is simplicity. Reducing your life to as simple ways as possible. We have the number one, the no change, the aspect that's contained with all within all life, that of oneness, meaning that what is within, and what is without are all combined, they're all together. And then the aspect of change. Where it's the ability of consciousness at the center of all things that receives insight from the outside and then applies a point of change at the center, which then vibrates and emanates out into one's environment. And the environment will constantly reflect back information for you to fine-tune your inner self so that it eventually lines up with who you feel you are on an integral level. And that is the reason that energy creates from the singularity to yang yin, to yang yang, yin yin, to yin joining itself with yang, to yang joining itself with yin, to yang joining itself with yin, to yin, enjoying that reflection. So this is the way that creation produces itself to give us a form in the BaGua, a clue, you could say, in how to develop oneself. And then, of course, we put that all into this wonderful circle, which manifests the changing potential of opposites to unify and harmonize with one another, to create a means by which we can return our consciousness to a state of oneness, to a state of wholeness, on a blank piece of paper, where we have the ability in the moment to recreate preciousness, enthusiasm, gratitude, appreciation, decency, cooperation, consideration, compassion, generosity, kindness, benevolence, all in the big umbrella called love, towards the self, which is the center, and towards the other, which is every other living thing that exists in the totality of your world, and bring that all back to oneness. And that is it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this second video newsletter and that you've got something out of it. Like I said, you can like the YouTube channel. It's only just begun, but it will grow. And if you have any questions, you can write those on an email to me at integralfreedom.com.au, or you can check out the Facebook page Integral Freedom and post them up there. I wish you all well, and I will see you again in 1 month's time. Thanks for listening.